Thank you. Appreciate you talking to us today. It's about a story, and I know it's not a comfortable story to talk about, but it's something that we had a student and some parents that were upset. They felt this, as Mary said, it hasn't been handled yet. There was a student that I spoke to who said that there was a presentation that they were given in her honors English class in November. It made her feel guilty, she said. It was called Check Your Privilege. She said it made her feel guilty, that she'd done something wrong, that somehow she's the oppressor simply because of her race, and that she felt singled out in the class. Are you familiar with that?
I'm aware of it.
Okay.
Yes.
The slide that she had seen. Do I not have it? I don't. Here it is. It was. She said when she saw this, it made her feel very uncomfortable in class, and that other kids looked at her. Is that appropriate in the classroom?
Well, I think this was a missed opportunity, and you can see from that it says University of San Francisco, and so that was the reference material. As you may or may not be aware, we don't teach critical race theory. I think the issue is that this reference materials from that university that in fact does teach it. And so for us, like any other opportunity, it was just a great opportunity to correct and to provide some additional guidance for the general staff, in that anytime there's an issue, especially if it's a controversial issue, make certain that you facilitate it so both sides of the issue could be discussed, and that's exactly what we did.
This was a week's worth of lessons, and if you need, I've got like a file that shows the whole thing if you need to see it. Okay. There was also a YouTube video that the students were supposed to watch, and in the video there was a line where the announcer said, "Your job as students who are receiving an education is to be aware of your privilege." Is that true?
According to the video, it is what it is, but as I said, it's nothing that we actually espouse or teach or profess. Again, it was used as a reference material for that particular lesson.
Were corrective actions taken?
As a general staff, the correct answer is we addressed the issue, and I'll reiterate what I just said. My direction to the staff, and it was from the very beginning, and this just served as a reminder, to one, avoid the controversial issues because they're very difficult to defend, and you don't know who gets offended because you don't always understand your audience. But in the event that you have to cover controversial issues, one, make certain that it is curriculum that's adopted, which is why I refer back to the reference material. And then two, facilitate the discussion so that each side can be discussed properly and give students an opportunity to defend. One of the things that we pride ourselves here at La Quinta High School is to cite materials to support an argument. And so regardless of which side a student may fall on, as far as the argument goes, as long as you can cite it, that's what we want to try to do. We're not here to tell you what to think about, how to think. We just want to make certain that when you do come up with an argument that you can defend your position.
Were the students in the class that had this lesson, were they notified that corrective actions? Because this district's statement on this was that the lesson was not in alignment with the district adopted curriculum. Quote, the teacher was operating outside the scope of adopted curriculum and had potentially presented a biased position. Well, first off, what did the district determine as to the bias? Was it or was it not?
I think what you just read was pretty accurate.
Okay, so you can't say if it was or wasn't?
Correct.
Okay. Were the students and the parents of those students notified of this issue in the classroom?
To my knowledge, I don't think we sent anything out. I think this was all handled in-house as it should be.
The student in question and the parents of that student, they say that they hadn't heard even the statement that I just read to you. They hadn't heard any explanation or notification from the district that their student had been involved in this, as the district itself says, was outside the scope of the adopted curriculum. Mm-hmm. Should they have been notified?
Had the family reached out to me, I would have certainly had the conversation. As we speak, I still don't know which family you're referring to.
Okay.
But that invitation is always open.
The district's pretty good about communicating though with families. I'm trying to figure out why, if you had a whole classroom that had a week's worth of lesson materials that they were presented with that you later said were outside of the adopted curriculum and potentially biased, shouldn't there have been a notification to the parents in that classroom?
As I said, we addressed the issue school-wide, and had I felt this was something that was an ongoing issue with that particular class or in general, then certainly that would have been addressed and communicated with the parents. But I think this was a one-off for someone who was well-intended, but clearly outside of what we would support.
This was an advanced placement English. Why honors? Why was that in the lesson plan? Have we figured out why it was in the lesson plan in the first place? Is there district oversight to lesson plans?
So we have adopted curriculum, and one of the things that you'll find with AP honors, some of that curriculum, there's a lot of flexibility, and I think, as I said, this was a teachable moment for our staff in terms of staying within the guidelines of the adopted curriculum. And when it comes to a class like an honors, those discussions should happen early in the school year so that we understand what material we're going to cover, and then discuss how we're actually going to cover those materials.
That week's lessons, that lesson plan, the students were graded on it. They had a number of grades that were assigned for that week. In fact, here's a copy of the lessons. There were, I believe, 4 assignments at least. This is a screen grab from Parent View.
Right.
Those grades are still on the student's record, and she got good grades, so that's not the issue. If this lesson was outside the curriculum and flagged as problematic, should they still be graded for this?
I think it was the work that they were graded for, not the content. And I think we need to be really clear about that. If there was an issue with a grade like any other student, there's a process where you can go through and challenge a grade. But as I said before, I'm not even certain which student we're referring to, and it was not brought to my attention that this was an issue. So to answer your question directly, if there's an issue with the grades, we can certainly address that with the particular family.
And again, it wasn't a matter of the grade, because the grade was fine, but
Right.
this student said she just wanted to be over with it. It made her feel very uncomfortable, and she wrote what she had to write,
Right.
just to be done with it. And then it was behind her, and she didn't want to think about it anymore. She said that she didn't really even want to talk about it that much
Sure.
more. Should that grade still be there?
Again, if the family has an issue with the grade, I am certain that the teacher will either reassign or simply remove that from the grade. But as you said, it's kind of hard to argue an A. That's what it looks like she would have received for that. So I'm not certain that that's really the issue.
She said she knew what to write.
Right.
But it made her feel very uncomfortable
Right.
that somehow she was guilty simply because of her race.
Yeah. And I'll push back on that a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know that that's the case. Without actually having to speak with the child, I don't know that's what is actually happening in the class. If that were happening, then clearly that would have been addressed. I don't know that it did. But again, I'm open to the invitation to the family to sit down and have that conversation.
More of a general question, is the classroom a place for activism? Because in a sense, this was kind of activism they felt.
I don't know if I agree with the premise of your question.
Okay.
Is it a place where you want to encourage ideas? Absolutely. As I've often talked to students, I don't give you a goal, a dream, and I don't want to put ideas in your head. I want to hear your ideas. I want to facilitate that discussion so that whatever your position is, I can hear it. And as I stated before, ultimately, I want you to be in a position to defend your position. That's what we do, and that's what we should be doing.
Okay. So again, you can't discuss what measures were taken to rectify? I think that was the word the district used. You can't talk about what was done to rectify it, but you feel that it has been rectified?
I felt it was dealt with from the onset. And there were discussions that happened within the department and then that happened school-wide about, again, if you are going to touch a controversial subject, make certain you can facilitate both sides of the conversation.
So, pushing back, you said the classroom can be a place for activism, but in this case, I'm just trying to summarize. In this case, not the right type of activism, but it can be for other reasons?
I wouldn't even say it's a place of activism. That's not a position that I would take. I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but it's the sharing of ideas and facilitating the ability for students to advocate for whatever position they take. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, that is going to be our responsibility for these classes.
Anything that you want to say in response to these questions? You handled them great. I appreciate the district and providing you and making you available to us. Is there anything that you want to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing that we don't do here at LQHS High School and we don't do within Desert Sands is we are not teaching critical race theory. And I know that that issue is out there and I can appreciate all of the passion around it, but it's not what happens on our campus. And what you were asking me about before, it was an incident that was dealt with, and I think it could have been, well, it clearly should have been handled in a different manner. But I understand the intent was not to go that route. It just so happens that they referenced materials that did reference critical race theory, and so for those that are concerned about that, I completely get it. But an issue that happened once, and we dealt with it at the site level, I actually felt that it was time to move forward and really address our students. And to be quite honest with you, I've not had any of my students or staff or parents come to me about the critical race issue as far as what's happening on campus. I know that happens outside of the realm of our instructional day, and I've had conversations outside of the instructional day with some of our parents and some of their concerns, and we address that, but we haven't reached the point where I feel like this is an issue on our campus or even within our district.
The parents that I talked to said that and the students said that they kind of thought this would be something that they might experience in a history class, but that this was an English class. And the issue of critical race theory, not necessarily being a subject plan like study CRT, but is it a framework that's worked into lesson plans throughout different subjects?
So the short answer is no. The short answer is no, and the broader answer is I actually know what it is, but knowing what it is, I can also tell you that it's not happening here.
And there are a number of different definitions. That's the thing, is it's hard to define the exact what is CRT.
Correct.
Simplified from what I've been able to gather, and just out of my mind, it's basically teaching that this country's racist history still impacts almost every aspect of society and government interactions with people to this day. Is that anywhere in the ballpark?
It's close.
Okay.
It's close.
Okay.
It's really about policies that evolved around race and ethnicity that set people on certain courses, and it's in my humble opinion, it's not a. If you know the actual theory behind it, it's less alarming than people might think. But regardless, this is not.
I'm going to stop it here. Yeah. We're not here to
Okay.
discuss critical race theory.
Okay.
We don't teach it.
Right.
Okay.
And I don't want to address it in any form. I think it's unfair to put Dr. Wilson in that
Okay.
position of trying to comment on something that we do not teach.
Okay. Good enough. Anything else that you wanted to say, or I appreciate your time. I know that their concern was that they felt it was inappropriate and that they never got a communication. They never were notified. They didn't know what we knew.
To all of my families, if they have questions, I will always have an open door policy to sit down with every family that has a concern.
Okay. Yeah.
So
We have, we're probably at this stage the most diverse school in the Valley.
Really?
And so you can imagine we have to be super, super aware of making certain that we don't alienate any segment of our community. We're the only high school, traditional high school, at least in the city of La Quinta. And
Yeah.
we have a great relationship with the city. We've always had tremendous supports in terms of our partners. And you don't know, and this is to the point that Mary was making, you don't know the makeup of the students that walk through the door. You can imagine, but I guarantee you're probably going to be wrong. And because you don't want to make those assumptions, that also means that your child, who may or may not be a student at La Quinta, but somewhere in Desert Sands, I have to treat that young man with the utmost respect and dignity because I don't know his history. And I also have to reassure that my staff is doing the same. And to the issue we were talking about, when there's a misstep, and none of us are perfect, we're going to correct it. For that same reason, I want to make certain that if your child today had a bad experience with one individual, we get it corrected. We get it corrected at the smallest level possible so that we can all move forward. And I have been a principal here for 5 years. I have a son who's a senior here. And I take my responsibility for our kids and their safety very seriously. Yeah. This particular family, I mentioned that it does make me sad that we didn't get a chance to address the family. And part of the reason why they don't have what they need in terms of a response is, again, I don't even know who we're talking about. Okay. And the beautiful thing about Desert Sands, and I've been in 3 different districts, is we are so good at making certain that if there's an issue that started at the site, did you try to get it resolved at the site? And our responsibility, and I promise you my colleagues take this very seriously, if there is something that we have to address at the site before it lands on the desk of the superintendent or the board, we have done our due diligence to address it. And I have not had the conversation. I don't know, I'm repeating myself, I don't know who it is, but I promise you this, had the family come in, it would have been resolved in the moment and that child would have felt supported. The scary part is the politics of the whole thing is that somehow or another there would be retaliation against the child. I have as much responsibility to protect her privacy as I do to make certain that what is happening in the class is something that we could all support. And it's a complicated process, but it's not. The piece that's not complicated is let us know. The complicated process is balancing the professional responsibility, the ethical responsibility, and of course what you're dealing with right now, the politics, which I don't do.
Yeah, it's difficult.